Welcome to Season 4 of the Get Out of Teaching podcast presented by Larksong Enterprises. This podcast is for teachers who are considering leaving education but feel like they have no options. I'm your host, Elizabeth Diakos. I'm a career transition coach who guides overwhelmed teachers through a 5-step process out of education and into a life they love. I'd like to see a world where the work of teachers is valued and respected, and that teachers have a career pathway that enables them to continue to offer value to society beyond their work in the classroom. So in this season, we'll be speaking to other experts who help people to change careers, as well as a few ex-teachers who've forged a pathway into something new. So come along for the ride as we get out of teaching. Episode 16. Hi everyone and welcome to the show. On today's show, I'm very pleased to be introducing to you Georgia Bamber, who is from the Southern Highlands of New South Wales and is a success coach who helps people to create change in their life, helps them get unstuck and helps them make that transformation into whatever it is that's next for them. Welcome to the show, Georgia.
Thank you very much.
All right. So, as you know, the audience for this podcast is teachers who want to get out of teaching. Yep. And often they feel like they have no options or they're really stuck. Actually, last night I was all set to have a call with someone and they just didn't show up. And I know that they didn't show up because they posted in the Facebook group that they were scared, that they thought that I was going to, pressure them into something they weren't interested in. And I think there's a lot of fear around trying to make a change when you've been doing something for a long time. And a lot of the people I work with have been teaching for 2 or 3 decades. It's really hard to shift out of that mindset of, that fear around how do I make a change from something that I'm so familiar with. So what would you say to that?
Well, if you keep thinking the same things and doing the same things that you've been doing all along, nothing in your life is going to change. So if you do want something different, then obviously you've got to get to that point where you are willing to make some changes, do something different, even just stick your toe out of the comfort zone just for a moment. I mean, it's just a fact of life. Nothing's going to change if you won't change. No magic pills, sadly.
Yeah, that's of course. It makes perfect sense. And I remember reading Martin Seligman's book, Flourish. Mm-hmm. He's the father of positive psychology.
Yeah, I've read it.
Yeah, and I was on a plane actually, and I think I left it on the plane, that particular copy of that book. But on the way to that trip, I'd been reading the book, and he said go a different way. So I detoured. I was heading from Port Macquarie to Newcastle Airport. I detoured along the Foster Tuncurry Road coast and back. I nearly missed the plane because they had a roadblock there and there was one of those things with the traffic light and you have to wait. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? I should have just stuck to the road I know.
It doesn't always work out. And that's what people are scared of. And there's no guarantee that it's going to work out. But, I always look at it. The worst case scenario is you're going to end up where you are now, which is what you've got already. So why not give it a whirl and see if you can create something better.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so there's a real kind of sense of hope and optimism around that.
Absolutely. But it's also that, things don't always work out. Life isn't perfect and you will make mistakes, but that's okay. It's all part of the learning process. I'm one of those people, that believe that there's no such thing as failure. It's just learning. And I think that's the way you've got to approach it.
Yeah. Okay, so imagine, though, that someone has been teaching for, say, 20 years. Mm-hmm. And so I've been using this persona that I've created called Donna. She's 52. She wants to get out. She's been teaching since she was, 22. Mm-hmm. And she just feels like she hasn't had to apply for a job for, a decade or something. She doesn't have an up-to-date resume. She's not sure what her transferable skills are. And she's terrified of moving out of her comfort zone. And also she's often in the main breadwinner or a significant breadwinner in the household. So her income's really important to the family. So then taking that leap, that risk is really...
Oh, it's huge. It's massive.
Yeah. So how do you help someone in that situation?
I would definitely, I think in this case, start them kind of on their why, like understanding why do they even want to do it and go from there. Because I think the reason for making that change is going to very much direct where they want to go. Or it might highlight that they don't actually need to make that massive change. There are perhaps just tweaks they need to make to their job or other things they need to add into their life. I think people often kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I would definitely get them to explore their motives for wanting to change. And once they know that why, then that why creates the energy and the enthusiasm. And I guess, helps with that fear factor, because if what you're going to get at the other side is worth it, then you will kind of go past that fear. But you really need to have that motivating, really compelling reason for wanting something.
Yeah. Okay. So often the why is escaping a difficult situation, or so I talk to a lot of people who have been maybe quite happy teaching for 15 or 20 years, and then something happens. There's a change in leadership, or a colleague comes into their world who's they don't get on with, and it becomes, maybe there's some bullying or something like that. So often it's not just a build up, but actually this it's kind of
event. The catalyst,
event, and so it's not just that they're not resilient or something. It's actually a really difficult situation that they're responding to. And so they want to get out, but there's a sense of panic around that because they're escaping from something bad. They may not even know what is the good thing that they want to go to.
Yeah, on the other side.
What do you do with that?
Well, I suppose there's always a carrot and stick, isn't there? But if your stick or the bad thing is bad enough, then that's probably motivating reason to push you out as well. So that's your why, to get away from the bad, and then you've got to gain that clarity around the next steps. But also I would definitely ask people to consider, okay, the situation you're thinking around the situation is that this is not a positive situation you want to be in, but is there a way that we could look at the thinking? Like with circumstances, the things that are happening outside of us are always neutral, right? They just are what they are. It's our own thinking about those circumstances, the subjective kind of experience of them, that creates the way we feel. So I would, if it was going to be a big deal about leaving and there were the financial issues and all those other things, I would actually get people to look at whether we could work with their mindset to see if they could live with the situation they're in, rather than kind of jumping out immediately to something else. Sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you look at a situation and think, well, I still don't want to be here, so I want to make a change. But then at least you're doing it for the right reasons. I think often people will jump to make a change without addressing their thinking around it, and then they just find themselves in the same situation again, just in a different place. So I think you need to address that underlying thought process that's going on.
So how would you go about that process?
Well, whatever the situation is, I get my clients to do things called thought downloads. So just pen and paper, whatever the issue is, take 5 or 10 minutes and just like blurt everything out on the paper. All those kind of thoughts and sentences going through your head, just get them down on paper, just take a step back, have a look at what you've written down, and then you'll see what's going on in your brain. It's kind of like when you look at your cupboard and it's this horrific mess and you don't like anything in there. You can take everything out and then you sort through it, and then you just put back the stuff you like. And so I get people to do that same process with their thoughts. Get them all down, sift through them, see what's going on, and see what's creating the feelings and then the fears.
I love that analogy of the cupboard. Like I'm thinking like your wardrobe of all your clothes that maybe you've got you're going up and you're coming back down in weight clothes, so that the size might be wrong, or the colors don't really suit you, or the patterns
that look great on you when you were 20, but they're just not working now that you're in your 40s or whatever. It's just some things. And that's the same thing with thoughts. We hold on to these thoughts that we had when we were younger, which might have worked very well for us back in the day, but they're not working for us anymore, but we're still leaving them kind of cluttering up our brain. And so to get rid of those thoughts or modify them and change them for thoughts that are going to work is really helpful.
Okay. So let's imagine then that Donna has emptied her closet of all her thoughts, and she's done the download, the brain dump onto the journal or wherever she's put it. I love that idea too of actually writing all this stuff down, because that way when you have made progress, you can look back and see where you were and in that moment and recognize the change that you've been able to create for yourself.
And even in the moment, it allows you to be much more objective about your thinking. You're like, oh God, I didn't realize I was thinking that, or that's a silly thought, or that's not logical. Like it helps you to really step back and get some perspective on all that, because you know what it's like. We all have these weird negative tape loops going around in our head, and sometimes we don't even notice them. but yet we react because of them or feel certain ways because of them. And so it's tapping into that awareness.
Nice. Okay. So we've done the brain dump. We've got this information now, and say she goes, okay, well, I guess I don't need to like leave right now. I could stay for another 6 months or a year and try to make it work. What are some strategies that you would offer that would help people to kind of adapt to that situation so that they could stay? Because I mean, I left, you know, a long and sort of difficult pathway out. And I wanted to just jump, but my husband's going, no, don't jump, you know, because he's much more cautious than me and less kind of, I don't know, what's the word, you know, reckless. But, you know, if you're the breadwinner, you can't be reckless, can you? So what advice would you give in that scenario?
And obviously, if the catalyst that you're wanting to change is, you know, abusive or dangerous or whatever, you get out. Like, we're not talking about anything like that. We're just talking about your everyday, I don't really like my job anymore, or that guy's, you know, annoying me, or, you know, whatever it is, these ordinary situations. I think just acknowledging the fact that the way you're feeling about your job is entirely created by your thinking in the moment. It's not created by what is going on. It's created by the way that you are thinking about that thing. And once you come to terms with that, you can choose, do I want to feel like that or not? And then sometimes you want to be angry, sometimes you want to be mad, and that's okay. But other times you might want to adjust your thinking a little bit so that you feel and act in a different way. So I think the very first thing is acknowledge the fact that what you're thinking is affecting how you feel, and that you can, you know, all your thoughts are completely optional. You can change them. So I think that's the first place to start and work with that. I mean, it's hard to say on a general basis. I mean, if we had a definite case, it would be easier to, you know, obviously talk through. But I think just understanding that we create our own feelings is very important.
Yeah. So I remember when I was, you know, in the midst of it and just feeling so dissatisfied, and I probably couldn't even put my finger on it. There were like 100 different things, you know, that were impacting on me. And I felt I was overcommitted. I felt put upon all the time. They were asking me to do stuff that I used to do for fun as an extra, and that somehow became part of my job description. So there were all these little niggly things that were happening that, you know, they called me into a meeting during class time, but they didn't find anyone to take my class for me. So then I was trying to run around trying to find someone who could take my class, and they wouldn't release people. And it was just like, so many little frustrations.
Yeah.
And that all added up to me just coming home every day, like just stomping around, going, I've got to get out of there, you know?
Yeah. And which is fine if that's driving you to make a change you want to make. But if it's driving you from something that you love, then you should really work on that thinking so that you can, like, as you said, so they, you know, you used to do things that were fun, and then all of a sudden they just seem like a chore. But the thing didn't change, just your thinking about it changed.
Yeah.
In one instance it was fun, in the next instance it was a chore, like, and that created the, you know, the frustration. So it was the thinking, not the actual thing.
Yeah. I guess in that case, I used to run an after school music program, and we used to take I've talked about this before, but we used to take the money that the kids paid and put it back into the art budget. So it was boosting the art budget by a significant percentage every year. And then something happened much higher up in the department where someone embezzled some money. And so they shut down any little activities like that where you took money from one group of students and gave it to another group of students. You couldn't do that anymore. So it had to go back to the same kids.
Yeah.
And so then suddenly the whole school stopped benefiting from this program that we were running on our own time.
Yep.
And really the money should have been coming to us if it was going anywhere, but we were giving it back to the art budget, and they wouldn't let us do it anymore. And oh man, that really sucked the joy out of it for me.
Absolutely. So then it comes down to boundaries and things like that. Like, say no. Like, instead of like carrying on doing something you don't want to do, confront it and get out of it, or, you know, say no to it. So I think all these things come into play, don't they? Just understanding, you know, when you're doing things that you don't want to be doing, why are you doing them? And can you get out of them? Can you delegate them to someone else? Like, maybe there are some frustrations and stresses that you can remove from your job, which is going to make it still fun. Or maybe there's just no way out. And that's when you kind of move towards, okay, what do I want to do next?
Yeah. I mean, I did love the actual teaching the ukulele, that was so much fun for me. I loved it. But one of the big benefits for me was just that it got to benefit the whole art program, because I was in charge of that budget as well. So it made my life easier if I had more money to spend than trying to scrimp and save every 5 seconds. Like literally the first year I started teaching, I was picking up confetti and stuff off the floor from one class to use for the next class because we had so little resources.
Yeah.
So it was. Anyway, I'll stop ranting on about that.
Oh, yeah, no, that's fine. And if things cause stress and frustration like that, and if you've just had enough, you've had enough. Like that's fine. But there are ways around that if you want to kind of look at your thinking. But sometimes you don't want to do that, and you just want to make a change. Yeah. And also, I think sometimes, especially if you've been in something for decades of your life, there are so many different experiences to have in life. Like, sometimes maybe you've got everything you need out of teaching and it's time to move on. There doesn't even need to be a difficulty or something going wrong. It's just like, it's fulfilled its role for me. Now it's my time to do something else.
I love that idea that it could have just, that it's okay to leave. I think we have this, at least in education, I think there's a real sense that it's a job for life and you can't move on. And it's almost, there's shame around moving on or it's like you're a quitter or a loser or whatever it is, and it's not that at all. It's just like, I've done my bit, I enjoyed it, the students enjoyed it, and now I want to do something else, and there's nothing wrong with that. So that's it's very much a stigma, I think, in society in general, is that we feel like we can never give up on something, but that's craziness if it doesn't make you happy anymore. Like, life's short. Why are you going to waste your time doing something that doesn't bring you joy? Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, what a soundbite that is. Okay, so let's imagine Donna has decided she is going to leave, and she's looking around now to see what's going to be next. Where do you start with that?
Depends on your situation. Obviously, if finances are an issue, then you might need to go into something that's going to be making money. If you've got a bit of time, then you can explore things. So I think that would definitely, your situation is obviously going to dictate what you're able to do. But in general, I just encourage people to think about, if you had, a few hours in your day, what would you be really excited to pick up a book about, or watch a documentary about, or, go down the rabbit hole of Google about, what are those topics that really interest you that you could spend at least a few hours on kind of learning more about, and just make a big list of those. And those are the things that kind of excite your interest. And then from those, learn a bit about them, and then see if you can find things that you are passionate about or excited about or think that you could incorporate in your life. But I think just start basically with what interests you.
Yeah, great. Okay, so let's imagine that Donna does have some time. She's been teaching for a long time, so maybe she's got a buffer or like a bit of long service leave or something like that. So she's got 3 months. Now I know that can go pretty fast.
Very quickly, yes.
I think I had 13 weeks. Is that right? No, I had 13,000. I had $13,000 from my long service leave when I left, which wasn't a great deal because I'd worked part-time along the way, but it did give me a little bit of breathing space to go, oh, what am I going to do now? And I rented out an art studio and blew it, but it was great fun.
Yeah, as long as you enjoyed it, right? That's the main thing.
I really did enjoy it. It was so much fun having an art studio and just being able to be creative in that time after I left. And then I had to kind of go, oh, okay, now what? But so say she's at this point where she's got a little bit of a buffer, she's got a bit of time, and the people I see often need to have a rest then because
that's exactly what I was going to say. First off, just take a break.
Yeah, okay. And then I love that idea of looking around and seeing what would you love to kind of explore further. But I guess there's always this disconnect between things that we love and things that are going to make us money. Yes. And so how do you navigate through that process?
I think firstly you need to decide. People are always under this impression that they need to be making money from their passions, but the two things can be completely separated. You can be, working at a cafe, making money and being a musician at night, and that's no problem. You don't have to be making money from your music if you're making money from your day job. So I think decide whether those things actually need to be combined, or whether you can just have a job that makes enough money that you enjoy, but frees up your time to do the things that you really love. So there are two ways of looking at it, I think. So you got to figure out, if you don't want stress in your life and you just want something simple, you might just go and get an ordinary kind of job that makes enough money for the things that you like, but gives you that extra time to do the things you love. Or you might find that, okay, I've got something I'm super excited about. I want to make this a business, or I want to have a new career, or whatever it is. And you go down that path. So I think you've got to, again, that depends on personality. It depends on how much risk you're willing to take, obviously, how much work you want to put into things. I mean, sometimes, especially if you've been working, teaching for 20, 30 years, I mean, you're in your 50s, you might not want to go into this full-blown new career. You might just want to be still engaged and interested in doing things and doing something different, but not necessarily working 80 hours a week. Like, it depends, again, on what you want to do. So I think you need to really sit down and assess, what do you want your life to look like in, let's say, 5 years from now? Where do you want to be living? Who do you want to be with? What kind of income do you want to be having? Do you want to be working for someone? Do you want a business? Do you want to be retired? Like, create that vision, and then you'll figure out the pathway that's going to help you get there. And there'll be many pathways to get to the same end result.
And I think that's really valuable to create that vision of the future, because then then you at least have a bit of an idea of what the first steps need to be.
Absolutely. Like, so if your vision is, okay, I want to move out of the city and I want to live on a little hobby farm in the country, that's going to set you in a certain path. But if you want to kind of, sail a yacht around the world, then that's a different path altogether. So I think you need to have that vision first. Otherwise, you're just going to be kind of walking down a path to nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yes, I've actually been following there's a guy who's he's just quit his teaching job, and he's setting up a comic book store in the US, in a little town in the US. I don't know a lot about him. I'm thinking I'll get him on the podcast maybe in 6 months' time, when he's had time to get established and not be in that panicky mode of setting everything up. But it's so much fun watching his journey. He's said today, I think I'm going to cash in my 401k, which is like the superannuation. And this is my retirement plan. I might as well, go all in. And I'm like, I'm kind of on the sidelines watching him do his posts with pictures of comic books and stuff, and thinking, that's so risky. And then on the other hand, how exciting.
And I think it's about that confidence in yourself, isn't it? Like, if you go for something and you fully back yourself, it's going to work out one way or the other. So it's about having that confidence and going all in. I think if you do things half-hearted, or if you do things with kind of fear and trepidation, it's never going to work out the same way if you're just all in and going for it. So I think that level of confidence is amazing. It's so fun as well to do that.
Well, it's fun watching him, because he posts about once a week, and it tells you the next installment of the story. So it's kind of like reading a comic book, actually. It's got these little vignettes. Okay, so say Donna decides she is going to pursue a hobby, actually I had one client who wanted to be like a physical, do like massage therapy, that kind of stuff. What are the, I guess you've still got your teaching job for the moment. What would you advise as a kind of nice way to transition out of one thing and into the next?
See, I always love people to see if there's a way they can dabble in it. Can they do it as a part-time job? Can they do workshops on a Saturday? Can they, things like that? Is there a way that you can test out to see if you like it? And that way, or if you're good at it, or whatever it is. And that way, it's going to be much easier to make the transition, because your confidence will be definitely higher if you've tried it out beforehand. I've got a client at the moment who is not in teaching, but she wants to move from her corporate job, and she just really wants to become a museum docent. The person who walks people around the museum and telling them about all the exhibits. She's just fascinated by that. And so she's found a way to volunteer at her local museum on the weekends and give it a try. So that's a great way. She's not jumping out of her corporate job, but she's found that way to kind of try it out. So I think that's a really good idea as well.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing with doing that is that it takes your focus away from work as well, doesn't it? It brings you another facet of your life that you can put your energy and time and your thought into, and it takes away the importance of whatever's happening at work.
And funnily enough, that might actually lead you to realizing that work's not so bad if you've got the other stuff in your life. So maybe you didn't need to do the big change. Maybe you just needed to add some other things, to add a bit of spice and variety. Because I think often times when you've been doing something for a long time, it just gets a bit dull. Like there's no challenge. And so what people are actually missing is something new, something to challenge them, something to spice up their life. It's not that they don't like their job. It's just that they need that little bit of pep, I guess, something to make it do.
Yeah. I love that idea too of just, I guess bringing richness into your life that maybe you feel like you're missing out on something. And there's a way of capturing that. Okay. So Donna's now done a bit of dabbling and she's decided she loves massage therapy, say, as an example. What does she need to do now? Like, should she jump? Should she ease out gently? What would you advise?
And it's going to be, I don't ever advise people to do anything. I help them talk through their own situation. So it's going to depend on the person. I would go through the pros and the cons and, weigh them up, be it, finances, their relationship, the lifestyle that they want to be living. I would get them to look at all the different factors, do a kind of, I'd call it a life audit. So I get all my clients, I have them do a life audit. I have them look at 10 different areas of their life. They rate them, and that really helps them to create that vision and to see what's working and what's not working and what they need to add to kind of make the life they want. So I would get Donna to do that, just really figure out how is this going to fit into her life and what does she want from it. And, if she's going all in, does she have the degree yet? Does she have to study for it? Like there's all these things to consider. So just make some kind of pathways to how it will work.
So maybe she can do some part-time study while she's still working.
Yeah, it depends on the person. Again, I think you just got to go, there's no one size fits all. You've got to go with your personality. Some people just like to go all in and they're happy with risk. Other people are more risk averse and they like to just tread slowly. So I work with my clients to figure out what's the pathway that's going to give them the confidence to make the change.
I love that. Okay. So we're working on the pathway. And then I guess, what would you say to Donna about that little voice in her head who's saying, but what if I fail?
Well, what if you fail? I would say, so what? Like, what is the like, figure out what is your worst case scenario, like know what it is up front. And oftentimes when you work through that, it's not as bad as you think it's going to be. The worst case scenario, as I said before, is often going back. Like imagine you're a teacher, you give up your job, you want to become a massage therapist. It doesn't work out. So you go back to teaching. Your worst case scenario is where you are now. So that's not so bad, right? So might as well go for it. So figure out what the worst case scenario is. And it's often not as bad as you think.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So as a final, just wrapping up, what other, any other wisdom do you want to share? Like anything else that we need to cover?
Yeah, I just think it's all about creating that awareness. Just at every stage, whenever and the best way to do it, whenever you're having a feeling that you don't like, if you're feeling uncertain or stressed or overwhelmed or angry or whatever it is, just take a breath and look to what you were thinking beforehand. And that's going to really give you the key to understanding what's motivating you and creating what you have in your life. So really just be aware of what's going on in your brain. Take the time out to kind of check in and, and you don't have to be like meditating every day or anything like that. It's really just checking in with yourself every now and then and knowing that what's going on in your head is all optional. You can kind of choose to believe it or not to believe it, to think something differently. The things going on in your head aren't facts. They're just stories that you're telling yourself. And I think once you understand this, it really shifts how you look at the world. And then you can start creating anything that you want. So just be aware of your thinking.
Great advice. Okay, Georgia, I'm going to put you on the spot now.
Oh, no, I know what you're going to ask me and I still don't have an answer for you.
Okay, so I've been asking everyone on the podcast, what's your favorite song, as a way of just capturing a little bit about your humanity and the things that light you up. So have you got anything for us?
So my humanity is that I'm terrible at remembering songs. There's one song I do like that I always think I would play it I want to play for my husband's his 60th is his next big birthday, but I love that song, Elton John, Your Song, but I actually like the version by Billy Paul. I don't know why, I just always like that song. It makes me happy whenever I hear it and it makes me think of my husband. So I don't know. Aww. That's my song for you today that I can think of.
Great answer. Thank you. We will put the link to that version of the song in the show notes for this episode so that people can have a listen in on that if they want to. Thank you so much for coming on the Get Out of Teaching podcast today, Georgia. It's been
very welcome. Pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You've been listening to the Get Out of Teaching podcast, presented by Larksong Enterprises, with your host, Elizabeth Diakos. Do you know someone else who could benefit from hearing more stories of hope and transition from teachers all around the world? Please take a moment to share this and other episodes via your podcast app. Each share helps me reach listeners just like you who can benefit from this content. The Get Out of Teaching podcast is proud to be part of the Experts on Air podcast network. For show notes and other resources, please visit larksong.com.au/podcast.